feel free to click the small globe at the bottom of the screen to choose your preferred language. This is going to be really important for our panel, so please make sure that you are in your preferred language channel. And with that being said, I think it's safe for us to move on. We will continuously drop a message in the chat reminding folks how to choose interpretation channels, but I think we can move forward. Awesome. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our town hall where we will look back on the first year of our partially elected Chicago Board of Education and also look ahead at what's to come as we continue transitioning to a fully elected board. My name is Imani Johnson. I am a community engagement manager here at Kids First Chicago. I'm also a former Chicagoan. Shout out to the West Side, and I'm also a mother of 2 boys. I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening to take a look at this really important change that is taking place in Chicago. We've had a partially elected board for just over 1 year now, so it's extremely important to stop and take a look at how they've done and how they've been doing so far. To help welcome you all this evening, I am going to turn it over to Blair Flowers, our Fair Governance Task Force Chair.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Again, my name is Blair Flowers, and I serve as the chair for the Fair Governance Task Force, formerly known as the Elected School Board Task Force. This task force began in 2021 after parent focus groups made it clear that families wanted a school board that was transparent and more accessible and more accountable to the communities that it serves. Since then, parents and community members have worked to push for more parent-friendly laws, remaining engaged through the legislative process and the implementation of the elected school board. My journey into this work started as an invested parent for my children, school safety, and why decisions that affect families are so often made without families at the tables. Parents, residents, and community leaders deserve clear, accessible information about who sits on the elected school board, how decisions are made, and what those decisions mean to our schools. Our families are most affected by these decisions, yet too often decisions reflect institutional priorities instead of lived experience. When wants of the few outweigh the needs of the many, trust is always going to be lost. Our parents are not asking for control. We just want to be informed, heard, and given a real opportunity to help shape and our perspectives and why this works.
Okay, it looks like Blair froze, so we are going to move forward. Thank you, Blair, for that part of the welcome. We really appreciate you and the hard work that you have been putting in for the Fair Governance Task Force. So now let's begin our evening by just going over what we can expect for our time together. So we just finished up the welcome. We next will be talking about the transition to a fully elected board. We'll then look at the year in review. We'll have a quick poll, and then you all will hear from our amazing panel. I'll talk through some next steps, and then we'll have our closing. So let's start by reviewing how this transition is taking place and what's still to come. So in December, Kids for Chicago released the results of a poll conducted in partnership with NORC. We wanted to know what Chicago adults knew and thought about the board. And here's some of what we found. Most of Chicago adults, around 2/3, didn't even know that this transition was taking place. This is a huge knowledge gap and shows that there is much work to be done to educate the public. We also found that 9 out of 10 Chicagoans couldn't name their own representatives. Only 43% of people trust the board to act in the best interest of CPS students. 7% have a great deal of confidence, and 36% have some confidence. This ranked ahead of people's trust in Mayor Johnson and the interim CEO, and just behind their trust in CTU. Only Governor Pritzker ranked significantly ahead of the board in this question of trust. 2/3 of people believe that Illinois should provide more money for K-12 education across the state. People also strongly oppose borrowing and staff layoffs to balance CPS's budget. So now that we've seen there is a big knowledge gap, let's review how this transition is taking place. We are in the process of transitioning from a 7-member board that used to be appointed by the mayor to a board that will be fully elected with 21 members. We are currently 1 year into this 2-year transitional period with the hybrid board. We have 10 members who were elected in November of 2024, and then we have 10 members and the president who were appointed by the mayor. So how will we get to a fully elected board? Elections will be held in November of 2026, where voters will choose 10 members for 4-year terms and 10 members for 2-year terms, and the president. The president will also be elected for a 4-year term, bringing us to what now will be a fully elected 21-member board. These next elections will be held on November 3rd, 2026. Then the fully elected 21-member board will be officially seated and begin their work on January 15th, 2027. So we just mentioned that there will be 10 members elected for 4-year terms and 10 elected for 2-year terms. Let's take a look at which ones fall into each category. So here are today's elected districts in yellow, and the appointed districts are in black. Today's elected districts will become 4-year seats after the 2026 election. They will be up for re-election in 2030. Today's appointed districts will be 2-year seats for the first term after the 2026 elections. They will be up for re-election in 2028. After 2032, each district will have 2 4-year terms and 1 2-year term for every 10-year period, similar to how Illinois Senate seats are elected. The board president's seat will also be elected to a 4-year term in 2026. All Chicago voters will be able to vote for the president's seat. And now that we've had a refresher on the transition process, let's take a look at how the first year of the hybrid board has gone so far. So let's start by revisiting the parent-identified priorities that Kids for Chicago has been advocating for since day one. And we'll take a look at how the school board has fared in relation to these priorities. So the first one being campaign spending limits, meaning money should not determine who wins. Secondly is parent seats on the board, meaning advocating for some board seats to be reserved for CPS parents. Third is non-citizen participation, acknowledging that parents should have a voice in the process regardless of immigration status. And then finally is fair racial representation, ensuring that the school board reflects the student body it serves. So, how has the actual board fared against these priorities? Following national trends on spending for school board races, Chicago's first set of elections in 2024 became very expensive. Over $13 million were raised and spent for the 10 races in 2024. You can see that large amounts of money came in from pro-charter groups with $3.5 million, and the CTU and pro-labor allies with $4.3 million. The candidates also raised money themselves, over $5.6 million. In 2026, we should expect to see even more money spent on elections. First of all, we will have 21 elections taking place in 2026, compared to 10 in 2024. All 20 districts will be on the ballot this year. And for the first time, we'll see candidates running citywide to serve as the board president. By law, the president will be allowed to vote on all issues beginning in 2027 with the fully elected board. By contrast, the current appointed president, Sean Hardin, is only allowed to vote in case of a tie. The president's race is sure to draw lots of interest and money for candidates, making it much more expensive than member races at the district level. Also, for the first time, we'll have incumbents running for election. Incumbents usually have an advantage over challengers in raising money for upcoming elections while they are in office, meaning that we'll likely see the amount raised per district going up this year as well. So now let's take a look at representation on the board. 88% of CPS students are children of color and 12% are white. As you can see, the racial composition of the current board more closely resembles the makeup of the city as a whole rather than the student body. 1/3 of the board members are white compared to just 12% of students. 9 of the 21 members are current CPS parents, while 5 are former CPS parents. We don't have an accurate estimate of how many CPS students have non-citizen parents at home, but we can look at the estimated number of non-citizen adults, which is about 1/8 of the city's population as a proxy. Like most U.S. elections, only citizens are allowed to register and vote for school board members. This is in contrast to LSC elections, which do allow non-citizens to vote. The law that established the elected school board also called for creating a non-citizen advisory board to provide some voice for parents who are not eligible to vote. The mayor is responsible for appointing members. Its stated responsibilities include advising the board on matters relating to CPS non-citizen populations, such as inclusivity or privacy and confidentiality. The law does not prescribe a deadline for creating this advisory board. It also doesn't provide any remedy if a mayor doesn't appoint the board. For what it's worth, Kids for Chicago has heard from the mayor's office about their plans to create the non-citizen advisory board. We must acknowledge that the national political environment may necessitate a cautious approach. Non-citizens may be reluctant to have their names listed publicly for fear of drawing attention from immigration officials. CPS may fear further cuts in federal funding from the Trump administration, which has not been shy about using the levers of funding to try to force its priorities on school districts across the country. The law also calls for the establishment of the Black Student Achievement Committee, which also has not yet happened. However, the Board of Education was recently accepting applications on their website, so we'll hope to learn more about that soon. Now let's take a look at how board members have voted on issues before them. So historically, with previous boards that were fully appointed by the mayor, most issues before the board for votes were not divisive. The boards generally just voted how the mayor wanted them to vote, leading to critiques that they were rubber stamping for the mayor. Generally speaking, most of the votes this board has taken to date have not been contentious or divisive issues. Even the $1.5 billion new teachers contract was approved unanimously after months of negotiation. That said, there have been a handful of votes that have been somewhat contested, splitting member votes, and we'll take a look at a few of those next. So here are the three issues that split the board's votes. The first one is the FY26 budget, which the mayor opposed. This led to a 12-7 vote, with one member abstaining from voting. This $10.2 billion budget did pass and did not include borrowing to cover a $175 million pension payment to the city. The second is the approving the interim CEO, Macklin King. The mayor did support this, and her appointment was passed despite the splitting vote 11-8 with one abstention. Finally, raising the tax levy to the maximum allowable level by law. The mayor did support this, and all his allies did vote yes. This was a quiet vote that took place during a special session, raising eyebrows for its lack of publicity. Next, let's look more closely at how these three votes broke down amongst members. So first, let's examine how these votes broke down between appointed and elected board members. There is a huge 63 percentage point difference between these two groups on these three issues. As you look at the bar on the left, you will see that 87% of appointed members' votes in green align with the mayor's position, compared to 10% against in pink. The bar on the right represents elected members' votes on these issues. Only 23% of elected members' votes aligned with the mayor's position, compared to 73% against. As we just saw, only 23% of elected members voted with the mayor on these issues. Let's take a closer look. So now we'll break down the votes on those three issues of elected members by their presumed interest alignment based on outside support during the 2024 elections. Of the four members who were heavily supported by unions, 1/3 of their votes were aligned with the mayor's preferences, and 58% were against. This is shown in the bar on the left, where green represents votes with the mayor and pink votes against the mayor. The three school choice-backed members voted against the mayor's preferences 100% of the time, as you can see in the middle bar. And on the right, you can see that the three unaffiliated members voted with the mayor 22% of the time and 78% against. Transparency with this board has surfaced as an issue worthy of deeper exploration. It seems logical that in an elective democracy, voters should have easy access to information about how their representatives vote and act so that they can hold them accountable. If you like the way your representative votes on issues you care about, you'll probably vote for them again at the next election. If you don't like the way that they vote, you probably will vote for someone else. Kids First Chicago released a report titled Promises in Practice just as the new board was seated in 2025. This report was based on parent and community input and included nearly 30 recommendations for the new board as they were beginning their work. One of the recommendations related to transparency is to publish board votes promptly and accessibly. It specifically says that they should publish them online within 24 hours of the vote taking place, and that they should be easy to navigate, searchable, and in multiple languages. As late as this past December, we could not find any published listing on how each member voted on every issue known as the roll call votes. They did have videos of the meetings posted, but the average voter is not going to watch long videos of meetings to learn how their members voted. The 2025 roll call votes were finally posted last month, 1 year after this new board was seated and began voting on issues. We still don't know how quickly new ones will be made available after the future board votes. The January 2026 board meeting votes still have not been posted as of February 4th. Additionally, the board sometimes debates in closed sessions where the public is not allowed to watch or listen in. Until the roll call votes were published, we did not have a public record of how members voted during closed sessions. There were even reports that the December 29th special board meeting, during which they voted to raise property taxes, was purposely kept quiet. The meeting was initially reported by a local news outlet on December 24th and allegedly wasn't posted publicly, as required by law, until afterward. CPS is investigating to determine who leaked the internal document that mentioned the meeting, claiming the document contained other non-public information. We don't know all the details of what happened here, but it doesn't feel transparent to hold special meetings about raising taxes over the winter break with little advance notice. Only one person showed up to the meeting to make public comment, in stark contrast to normal board meetings where all 30 public comment spots are usually full. So let's wrap up our analysis by looking at some of the key takeaways after 1 year of the partially elected school board. 1. This hybrid board is more independent from the mayor than any fully appointed board ever was. A common critique of previous appointed boards is that they were only rubber stamping what the mayors wanted. That dynamic has clearly changed with this hybrid board. In fact, even the mayor's appointed members and elected allies have shown a surprising willingness to vote against the mayor's preferences on certain key issues. Perhaps this is a response to feeling accountable to voters. 2. The mayor will lose control in 2027. Despite displaying more independence, the mayor still holds significant influence over today's board. But he and future mayors will lose control in 2027 when the fully elected board is seated. 11 months from now, the mayor's influence will be very diminished. 3. There is a divide between elected and appointed members on key issues. On contentious votes, there is significant difference in how elected members and appointed members vote. Elected members are much more likely to vote against the mayor's preferences, and that even includes the mayor's elected allies. 4. There are still shortcomings to be addressed. Non-citizens still do not have a voice in this process, and transparency is a major issue. It was hard to find voting records, and we still don't know how quickly roll call votes will be posted. This board has also not always been forthcoming with information about public meetings. Now let's take a quick audience poll before we get into our panel. We talked a little bit about transparency, and now we want to gauge your satisfaction with the board's communication to the public. Please scan the QR code or click the link in the chat to open this survey and answer this one question survey. We're going to give you all about 2 to 3 minutes to take the poll. And I'll mute myself so you all can focus. All right, I think we're good to move forward. Feel free to finish up as we introduce the panel. All right, now I would like to introduce our panel. As we continue to transition from a 7-member board to a 21-member board, it is important to hear from the stakeholders to learn how they are experiencing this period. This panel will include parents, a teacher, and a former board member to speak about their perspectives and their hopes for a fully elected board. It is now my pleasure to hand it over to our esteemed moderator, Brandis Friedman, Alexandra and John Nichols, Chief Correspondent and Anchor of WTTW Chicago. Brandis, thank you so much for joining us this evening and welcome.
Imani, thank you. Thank you so much for the setup that you just gave us. I think it's very useful to have that analysis and that explanation, and I'm looking forward to having our panelists join us. So I'm gonna keep it loose, right? Because it's just us. I'm gonna ask our panelists to come on in. We've got Arnie Rivera. He's the Chicago Education Alliance former CPS board member. He's a member of the Chicago Education Alliance, former CPS board member. Arnie, are you there? As I say your name, you can just go and turn on your camera. There he is. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Brandon. It's good to see you.
Awesome, you too. Melanie Lopez, she's a CPS educator and a Kids First Chicago Parent Advisory Board member.
Hi, nice to see you.
You as well. Thanks for joining us. Claiborne Wade, also a K1C Parent Advisory Board member.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And Alma Sagala, K1C, excuse me, Parent Advisory Board member as well. Hola, Alma, gracias. So I'm gonna pull up my questions because they disappeared just a second ago. But so I wanna ask all of you this first round of questions. I want to look back over this past year and ask you, how do you think the new school board worked? Arnie, I'll start with you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Brandis, and thank you for Kids First for having me. I think anytime you're going through such a significant transition between a 7-person mayoral appointed board to a 21-member hybrid board, there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be a lot of challenges and transitions that go into it. And I think we're all seeing that play out. I think, as part of the original presentation for this, though, you saw a lot of work get done, right? Even if it was challenging, even if there was tension at time, they, approved the collective bargaining agreement. They approved the budget, even if it was challenging in nature. There was consensus in regards to kicking off for superintendent search for the first time ever from a school board, as well as other areas that inevitably would have been rife with conflict, and certainly we saw it play out. But they got work done. It doesn't mean that it was perfect, but at the same time, the work didn't stop, and a lot of progress was made.
Thank you. And I think sometimes like that sort of that push and pull that's important too and necessary. Anything worth fighting for or anything good is worth fighting for, right? Not everybody should agree. Melanie, I'm going to come to you as well. How do you think this last year went?
I agree with Arnie. I feel like a lot of big decisions were made. I feel like a lot of conversations were had. I just feel that there was not enough communication maybe out there to the public so that the public could be more aware of what the board was working on. I feel like you had to be like a part of something like a K1C to really get that information. So I feel like had they maybe, provided more communication to the public of like, hey, these are the things that we're working toward, get feedback, get information from families, have a little bit more discussions that were open to the community, I feel like that would have been helpful.
Claiborne, same question to you.
Thanks. And I couldn't agree with more with Arnie and Melanie. But I, hope that, everyone can understand and recognize the significance of this election, because this will be the first time in Chicago public school history that we have a fully elected school board. I think that the board worked out pretty good this year, because of, it's been more discussions, more debates, and I think that that's, wonderful. Seeing that in previous years, it's always been a majority of the time the board completely agreeing to everything that the administration have to offer. So I think that, with the board partially elected, partially appointed, we have those, rigorous debates, and I think that's wonderful.
Alma?
Sí, gracias. Buenas tardes. Yo creo que viendo desde la perspectiva de tener desde 7 miembros a tener 21 miembros, yo creo que Chicago estamos a la vanguardia de hacer nuevos cambios en lo que es la educación. Yo creo que también lo que ha hecho bien la nueva junta es que han hecho eventos alrededor de la ciudad para que nosotros conozcamos, nosotros los padres conozcamos a estos miembros y ver como qué tipo de trabajo están haciendo, que se están acercando a las escuelas y que han tenido un poco de comunicación con los padres de la comunidad, ¿verdad? Porque de eso se trata, que los padres tengamos colaboración con ellos, aunque pues ahora en este año no hemos visto el rendimiento que se debe de ver porque solamente hemos tenido un año de trabajo, pero poco a poco vamos a ir viendo esta transición. Y yo creo que uno de los retos más grandes es ese, la transición de tener de 7 miembros a tener una junta tan grande como 21. Y estamos en esa acomodación y todos estamos aprendiendo de esta nueva junta.
Gracias. And go ahead.
Buenas tardes, yo voy a estar interpretando lo que Alma dijo en español a inglés. Good afternoon, I'll be interpreting what Alma just said in Spanish into English. So Alma was saying that she believed, based on the perspective of seeing a new board that is coming from the transition from 7 members to 21 members in Chicago. Chicago is the one who is doing an advance, a cutting age initiative. So, and one good thing that we're seeing as well is that we're seeing events around the city where this is probably made to have the parents to know all the members of the school board, knows them. They come close to the schools to know the schools. There has been a little bit of communication with parents, and that's the goal, right? We want to see collaboration between the board members and the parents. So this year, we're seeing the challenge of having that transition from 7 to 21.
Thank you. Yeah, that's gonna be a big challenge. So to that point, for the first time, as we've said, the entire board is up for election this year. We also just heard about the Kids First Chicago poll, showing that nearly 2/3 of Chicago adults are not aware that this transition is happening. Only about 10% can name their own board representative, as we heard Imani explain to us earlier. Arnie, where do you think the responsibility lies for increasing awareness about the election?
So obviously the cliche answer is all of us that have a vested interest. I mean, I think pragmatically, though, I think education-oriented organizations that have, good expertise in this work and have an infrastructure and a constituent base that we can activate. I think those are the most, well-positioned organizations to help lead the work. I think obviously Kids First Chicago is a leader in this parent engagement work, and they've been very successful. And I know we'll continue to be leaders in this space. We have the preeminent organization in the city, Academy for Local Leadership, that's focused on school board governance and recruitment and information dissemination. But I think all of us that have areas of expertise, networks that we could activate, who can then activate their networks in the community, especially those that are closest to the work and who's the decisions of the school board are going to impact the most. I think the more that the education community that's well positioned to really help in a nonpartisan and an objective and neutral way communicate the importance of this election and the roles and responsibilities of the school board, I think will be a great first step as we head into the election season.
Claiborne, I'm going to throw you the same question. Who do you think is responsible for making sure that parents are aware of, and not just parents, voters, that everybody's aware of what's going on?
Right. So I think that, everyone, have a role to play in ensuring that, everyone know, who's on the board and the roles of the board. And I went far as creating a list. I believe that local school council has a role to play in it. CPS leadership as well have a role to play in it. Community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, I think, have a role to play in it, as well as the candidates who are running for board members. I think the responsibility definitely relies or lie in their hand to making sure that we all know what's their role and duties as being a part of the school board.
Melanie, do you have any concerns, about that awareness coming from the moneyed groups who are trying to influence the election in favor of their candidate? Of course, talking about, it seems like in education in Chicago, it tends to break down along, there's the pro-charter groups and there's CTU and the labor groups, and then there's everybody else. Do you have concerns that big money or lots of money will get into this and influence the election?
Absolutely. I think it's the same thing with any political entity, right? I feel like it's always this thing of who has more, gets the word out more, can persuade more, has more connections. And it's not grassroots and it's not what parents need. What parents need is information. They need to be able to make a decision based on the needs of what they see their students and their schools need, not on who has a bigger budget for campaigning or who has connections with the right people or so I feel like the issue with the campaign funding, I agree with the idea of possibly having a cap or having some kind of restrictions to it so that it's more about getting informed, getting out there rather than who can create better flyers or commercials or persuade people through advertisements.
Alma, what do you think needs to be done between now and November to be sure that CPS families are participating in the election, learning about it, and able to make their own choices when it's time to vote?
Gracias. Yo creo que lo acaban de decir mis compañeros, ¿verdad? La responsabilidad es de nosotros. Y yo creo que lo que tenemos que hacer es pasar la voz, ¿verdad? Hablar con los concilios escolares, principalmente, hablar con las escuelas. Hablamos de que solamente 2/3 sabemos acerca de esta Junta de Educación. Yo creo que tenemos que hacernos un poquito más responsables en pasar esta voz y decir que las elecciones vienen. eh, pero también a mí lo que me preocupa es esos fondos malversos, ¿verdad? Acerca de las campañas, el dinero mal utilizado en vez de utilizarlo en algo de educación y también utilizarlo en algo de programas. Em, y como digo, también a pasar la información lo más que se pueda, utilizar las plataformas que tenemos en las redes sociales, utilizar reuniones como estas, utilizar las organizaciones como Kids First para informar más a la comunidad y pues también tener más conciencia acerca de estas nuevas elecciones.
Gracias, Alma. So Alma was saying that everyone just said it. It's about passing the word, passing the knowledge, passing the information. We should talk with LSCs. LSCs should be involved. Schools should be involved. Like the survey just said, 2/3 don't know what is going on. So this is all of us has the responsibility. We have to be more responsible to know when their elections are. We have to pass that information. But also, what concerns me, it's about the misuse of all this money and how this money is influencing the elections instead of using this money for education, for programs. We can also use social media to do awareness. We can also use this kind of meetings, this kind of town hall that we're using right now, passing the words with organizations like Kids for Chicago.
Thank you. So Kids First Chicago, you all released a report providing some suggested guidance for the future board about governance, inclusive engagement with community members and families, among some other suggestions. Alma, Claiborne, Melanie, I know all of you are on the parent advisory board that was sort of behind this report. I'm going to come to you first, please, Alma. Give me a sense, if you would, of what you all would like to see. What were some of the suggestions in that report?
Bueno, lo acabamos de ver en nuestro taller, ¿verdad? Tener límites de gastos, asientos para padres en en la nueva Junta de Educación, participación de no ciudadanos, representación racial justa. Pero yo creo que otra de las cosas que me gustaría ver es tener esa transparencia y esa comunicación con esta nueva Junta de Educación. Ver que los padres, ¿verdad? Tenemos el poder de comprender fácilmente que existe esta junta para tener esas conversaciones y para hacer esos cambios que se necesitan en lo que se basa en lo que es la educación, pero también en las escuelas. Que esas decisiones, ¿verdad? Que no se tomen solamente con la junta, que haya esas conversaciones para que las decisiones que se tomen en conjunto dependiendo de las necesidades. Que la honestidad sea importante, ¿verdad? Y que la comunicación debe de ser fluida, de ambos sentidos, que sea de parte de ellos, pero también de parte de nosotros.
Gracias, Alma. So Alma is saying we saw it a little bit before in the workshops. It's about the parents identifying priorities, campaign spending limits, parents sit on board, non-citizen participation, fair racial representation, but also we want transparency. And we want also the understanding. We have to know that we have the power to understand, to have this kind of conversation about education, about what is going on in schools, and take this decision based on needs and the needs of the schools, and do it with honesty. And the communication has to be in both ways.
Claiborne?
I would just like to add, I know that, we had made a list, a clear framework of how we wanted the board to operate. And we listed them quite clearly in our requests. Some included subcommittees for decision making, adopt a clear governance model, articulate clear roles and responsibilities between the board and the CEO, as well as public board roll call votes. And we have yet to see any of this in existence to a certain degree. I know that in recent months, it took a year for them to finally show the votes, roll call vote online. But what I would like to see, just like the lawmakers down in Springfield, or we can go far as the federal members of Congress, those votes are made public within, I won't even say 5 minutes, if that. And a year it's a tad bit too long for us to see how our board members are voting.
So more expediency for sure is what you'd like to see. Melanie, same question for you.
I think just transparency. I think having secret meetings does not give people the feeling that this is something that is a board that could be trusted. Decisions being made without proper communication, like Claiborne said, without allowing results to be shown immediately, things like that cause people to get concerned with the ethics of it. And so more transparency is needed.
Arnie, you've served, of course, on both sides of this, right? Like you've worked for CPS as CEO. You've also been an appointed board member. What do you think some of the challenges for the future board are going to be, and what advice might you give those who get elected?
Sure. So, aside of the standard issues that board members have to grapple with, fiscal challenges, and certainly for Chicago Public Schools enrollment and some of the educational challenges, I think, a year from now, all these board members are going to be fully elected. And I think it's going to be very important and, to figure out ways to forge, the necessary relationships amongst themselves, with management and with the mayor's office and other city agencies, right? Even though the board will be independent fully from, the mayor's office at that point, certainly we all have a collective responsibility, and those relationships are going to be important to really moving the work forward. So I think it's going to be really incumbent upon the board, as an entity to figure out how those relationships are being established. And you're also going to be balancing it as an elected official, right? You're going to have 21 board members, including a number of them whose elections are going to be up in 2 years. And I think balancing, the necessary difficult decisions that are going to be made at a time where, you're going to be running for reelection in, potentially a year and a half, 2 years, is going to be an additional challenge that we're going to see play out for the first time. In regards to advice that I give board members, I think working across the aisle and finding common ground, I think is going to be really important. I think we take a look at what's happening at the federal level and the inability to work with one another, across parties. And I don't think we view that as effective governance. And certainly we don't want to see 21 school board members that can't, work together and collaborate and build coalitions with one another. We wouldn't view that as productive, right? And I think all these board members are going to have more that unites them than divides them. I know that's a cliche term, but I think it's going to be really important for them to find common ground early on, develop trust and respect for one another, especially on issues that they have, consensus and agreement on, and then start to use that as momentum to tackle some of the more challenging issues where there will be inherent disagreement.
You all of you are so polite. Feel free to jump in if you'd like to as well. If you hear a fellow panelist say something that you'd like to add to, you're welcome to do so. Alma, I'm going to come back to you because you live in the back of the yards. It's where a lot of families are immigrants. Some parents don't currently have a formal vote in school board elections. If a non-citizen advisory board were fully active today, what do you think most of those families would want the board to understand about their children's needs right now?
Muy buena pregunta. El, el decir que si existiera ya ahora una junta de no ciudadanos, yo creo que trabajaríamos los padres precisamente ahora, ¿verdad? Hay una gran problemática en toda la nación, que es inmigración, y lo voy a volver a decir. Ahorita el gran problema en estos últimos meses ha sido la asistencia de los estudiantes hacia CPS, ¿verdad? Lo que pasó con Midway Blitz es una gran preocupación con las familias y eso está afectando a todos los estudiantes, no solamente a los estudiantes inmigrantes indocumentados o de padres indocumentados, está afectando a todos los estudiantes y yo creo que esa es una necesidad primordial. A mí me gustaría que si ya existiera esta junta, pudiéramos tener conversaciones con ellos para hacer unas acomodaciones en ver cómo estos estudiantes pudieran tener, que no faltaran a la escuela, por ejemplo, en ver cómo tuviera CPS tal vez transporte para ellos, en que hiciera CPS acomodaciones para estos estudiantes en clases remotas, que tal vez contratara personas en las escuelas para que cuidara a estos niños, para que cuando los padres estuvieran seguros pudieran ir por ellos después de que terminen las clases. Que buscáramos lugares seguros alrededor de las escuelas, pero sobre todo que tuviéramos una educación, ¿verdad?, de equidad, así como existen las escuelas del norte, que existieran las del sur, ¿verdad? Ahorita los recursos están cada vez más cortos. Abogar en todo lo que sean las necesidades por nuestros estudiantes. Pero yo creo que esa es la primera necesidad que ahorita tenemos en ver cómo podemos arreglar esa parte, porque esto va a seguir por 3 años más. No es que se va a arreglar ahorita, va a seguir por 3 años más y esta preocupación en estas familias y en estos niños va a seguir. Pero también me gustaría que hubiera acomodaciones en salud mental para estos estudiantes que están pasando estas necesidades o para las familias de CPS. Gracias, Vanessa.
Bear with me, guys. I took notes of everything, but bear with me, okay? So Alban said good questions, right? If the question is if, right? If it existed, this non-citizen board, then we as parents, we would work because we see that there right now, and I'm gonna say it again, we have a problem, immigration problem. As you know, last month, CPS attendance was affected. Since the Midwest Bliss, whatever they call it, it affects all students, not only non-citizen students, not only who have not documents. No, all students were affected. So if we have this non-citizen board in place, they should be advocating for accommodations, like so the students won't miss school. What kind of accommodation? I can give you some examples. Transportation, right? Provide transportation for these students because parents are afraid to take the students to schools. Remote learning for these students, only for these students who cannot attend school due to safety reasons. Hire people who can pick up these kids from their house and put them in the school. Have safe haven places around schools. But also, we need equity in education. We don't have the same equity. We can see all the resources in school who are in the north side, but not in the south side. So we will be able to advocate for all the students. We need to fix this. The primary needs right now is this this situation with immigration, and this is going to be continued for 3 more years. So the concern is there, and we have to work together, but also we need to think about the mental health for these families as well.
Thank you. And you're doing great. Claiborne, you're a West Side parent. What information about the board's work or decisions still feels hardest for families to access? I know we've talked about, some of like hearing about their votes and learning about what board members are doing and what, what's happening behind closed doors when they go into executive session. Is there something that you think the board should be doing differently, or something family and community members should be doing differently to better engage and understand?
Well, I think that if you are not, we're part of Kids First Chicago, and I do appreciate them, and I'm not just saying it because I'm part of their parent advisory board, but I think they do a wonderful job of making sure that the parents' voices are elevated. But I think about those parents who aren't a part of these parent organizations, and just maybe want to speak up on issues that they believe that they feel right about speaking up for. So going to those board meetings, or even going online trying to figure out how to sign up to speak at the board meetings, I think those should be accessible, as well as speaking broadly with this one, understanding the language. I know in Springfield, there's legislation or city council ordinances. I believe that it should be the language should be understood. You should be able to understand the language, and oftentimes, all the time, it could be a bit challenging to understand. So I think that that barrier needs to be but broken down to the point where we understand what's going on.
Thank you. Melanie, over to you. You're an educator as well. From your perspective as a teacher, as an educator, how have board decisions, have you seen them come into the schools and the classrooms? What's been the effect?
It's kind of hard to know because I don't think people were aware of what those decisions were and how those decisions play into it. So I feel like in a lot of ways, it's kind of I know as an educator what the decisions have been, like, the CTU contract being signed, things like that. The property taxes, I think that's one of the big ones that most people know, because it affected everyone. But I feel like in the classroom, what we have seen has not really manifested yet. Right now, the contract has just started. We're hoping for more funding, for more resources through it as and in the education setting. We have not seen so much of that yet.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, because then we also talk about like parent engagement and, parents not knowing what's going on for some of them, not, K1C parents, because y'all are obviously aware of what's going on, but not everybody is. And I guess if you're not showing folks where it's hitting them, right, where it's hitting home
Right.
in the classroom, which is where parents are most active, right? They know who their teachers are and what's happening on the school level. Um, is that one reason for I don't want to say the lack of involvement, but sort of like the absence of involvement, the absence of awareness about what's going on. I'm just kind of throwing that out there to anyone.
Oh, if I could jump in on that, I would
Sure.
say absolutely. I think that a lot of times, like when parents hear about like cuts in funding, they don't understand like where is this coming from? Like why is this happening? Who do I talk to? Where can I advocate for my school or for my child? And so I think this is where the elected school board needs to kind of step up a little bit, maybe in communication. It's like we're having these town halls, we're having these conversations. Let's find out why these things are happening and come up with solutions and ways to solve these issues. But I think if the communication is not out there, it's for a parent who like for some of our parents who maybe are undocumented, they're a little nervous to go out to things they don't know and speak up because it's like, well, what situation am I putting myself in, right? Like also for the parents who are strong advocates, it's overwhelming to know, who do I speak to first? Do I go to my alderman first? Do I go to my elected school board first? Who is, like we were saying, some parents don't even know who the elected school board person is in their district. So like
Do they
all
go
of
to the
that
LSC
information,
first? Like it,
right? Like what path, what is the proper channels?
Claiborne, Alma, Arnie. Arnie, you're first because I saw your
Yeah.
mic go off.
Yeah, I'll add. I think, and that's one of the hopes of of a fully elected school board, and even we're kind of managing through that transition now, is to have school board members that are representative of the communities that they serve. When I was an appointed school board member, there were 7 of us, and our responsibilities were system level, right? We didn't have a responsibility to go back to the 30 or 40 school communities that we represented. And this new board is kind of working through that, right? You have 20 board members who represent communities, and the roles and responsibilities of managing community input and being responsive to that is probably you'll get different answers if you talk to to a number of them. And I think that's, as we start looking at a fully elected school board a year from now, it's how are we making sure that the candidates that are coming to the table are meeting the expectations that we're setting, that we want to set collectively for them, right? How do we make sure that a year from now, those 20 individuals, because obviously the board president is going to be citywide and have a different responsibility, but what are the expectations that that we can collectively set to those 20 new elected school board members, so that there's consistency across the board as well? I think that's going to be important. I mean, I'm on a number of newsletters for the current board, and a number of them are out in their communities all the time and talking to families, talking to principals, talking to practitioners. And the question is, how do we start to develop best practices across the board so that a year from now, the new 20 board members that represent school districts have tools in their arsenal to be more responsive to community needs.
And I think with that, with the community understanding and knowing who their school board members are, I believe it's important too that the elected school board members also have district officers, staff members who work for them. And from my understanding, it's you have the board, but correct me if I'm wrong, Arnie. Is it 1 or 2 staff members that work for the entire school board? So imagine reaching out to your board member and they responding back to you a week or 2, which that does not look good as a board member, especially when you are seeking information or making sure that you're representing them well, let alone coming back to them coming back to the constituents and asking them for their vote for reelection. So think that's important as well.
Alma, sorry, I have a fry. Alma, did you want to add anything?
Sí, gracias. Estoy de acuerdo con todo lo que han compartido mis compañeros también. Ver, ¿verdad? Lo que acaba de mencionar Claiborne es muy importante, ver las personas que vamos a poner en ese puesto, independientemente de que si podemos votar o no. Yo creo que la influencia cuenta mucho, hablar con personas jóvenes, ¿verdad? ¿Quiénes son las personas adecuadas que deben de estar en el puesto? Hablar con las familias, pasar la voz de quiénes son las personas adecuadas que deben de estar en este distrito, si es adecuado para tomar el puesto en la Junta de Educación. Hablamos también de la preocupación, ¿verdad? Perdón, de lo que pasa en los salones, ¿verdad? Con las familias. Cómo podemos arreglar un poquito esto con todo lo que está pasando? Am, bueno, discúlpeme, se me fue un poquito todo lo que iba a decir.
No te preocupes, no te preocupes. Alma is saying that she agreed with everything that everyone says, all her colleagues in here, all the panelists. Like Claiborne once mentioned to see who are we putting in those seats, right? In the board. Who are we putting in there? We have to talk and educate our young population, right? Because they need to know what is going on. They need to know who is the appropriate people to be in those seats, who is the appropriate person to take those decisions, especially since we have concerns about what is going on in the classrooms.
Thank you. Okay, so as long as sticking with this board and looking back kind of a little bit, a lot of people noticed that this diverse board that they voted unanimously still to approve the recent CTU contract. And Melanie, you mentioned that a minute ago. What did that moment signal to you about, how this board is exercising its authority, but also how it's seeing its challenges? Melanie, I'm going to come back to you for that one.
So my concern with the approval is, as great as it may seem for the CTU that it was approved unanimously, it is healthy to have good negotiation. You want to make sure that no side is completely one-sided. You want to make sure that things are viable and not just through one lens. So with it being a partially elected board, currently hybrid, it made me wonder, like, how many, with Mayor Johnson being explicitly a former, CTU member and very much on the side of the teachers union, how much his influence was a part of that decision. And it makes you worry, like, for future decisions, will the board be able to separate the connection to the mayor or the mayor's power over them and be able to make decisions that may sometimes push against things that he might push for? Because I don't think this was properly thought through when they approved on how they were going to fund everything that was connected to this contract. And I think that's where those decisions in December came through with the secret meeting and the raising of the taxes and things like that. And I think that was something that had there been a little bit maybe more conversation and pushback, it would have been a better conversation and maybe thought out more thoroughly before just approving it and then now trying to find ways to fund it, working backwards.
Claiborne, Arnie, Alma, do you all want to add anything to that?
No, I think Melody did a wonderful job with her answer.
Awesome. Okay. Looking ahead, what is it that you're going to be looking for? And I'm going to come to all of you on this question as well. But what is it that you're going to be looking for in a candidate? And are you considering a run yourselves? Claiborne, you're first.
All right. So, no, Brandis, I'm not running for the board seat at Chicago Public School Board. But I will also be looking for, is the board member out knocking on doors, making phone calls, ensuring that they're listening to the constituents, their clear vision of how they're going to govern and going down to to the board meetings and representing their constituent bases. And I believe that we also have to pay attention to when we do have meetings with our candidates and eventually the ones who are elected, making sure that they are listening, but making sure that the things that we've outlined as parents, that they are actually putting the rubber to the road. And I think that comes along with trust, especially if it doesn't get done. And lastly, I think this is important. I think all of us could agree on this, that they are going down and making sure that our scholars, our students are their number one priority in advancing their educations.
Thank you. Alma?
Claiborne, estaba yo por decir que tú, por favor, fueras una persona candidata para la Junta de Educación. Tuvieras muchos votantes a tu favor. Pues vamos a confiar en que esta nueva Junta de Educación que se está formando, ¿verdad? En el 2027, ya que el alcalde no tenga a su disposición como lo está teniendo ahora mismo, vamos a confiar en que ellos hagan un buen trabajo. Este cambio no solamente es para la Junta, es para todos CPS, y ese cambio no solamente lo queremos para Chicago, lo queremos para nuestros barrios, lo queremos para nuestras escuelas, para nuestras comunidades. Y queremos que esa comunicación o esa problemática que existe no solamente se decida en esa Junta de Educación. Queremos que haya esa transparencia y que venga hacia nosotros con una solución. Yo creo que la esperanza que yo quisiera tener en esta nueva Junta es que se convierta en acción. Hasta ahí dejo. Gracias.
Gracias a ti, Alma. So, Alma was telling Claiborne that if he will run for the board, he will have a lot of voters behind him. You will have the votes, Claiborne. So yes, I think it's about trust, having trust in this new board that is going to be in 2027 is going to be key in here, where the mayor won't have the power that he has as right now. So my hope is that they're going to do a good job, not only for the board, as a board, but it's going to be good for CPS. It's going to be good for our schools. It's going to be good for our neighborhoods. So I want to see that they're not taking decisions just by themselves, but that they're taking into consideration the community so that there's transparency. I want to see a board that is turned into action.
Thank you. Arnie and then Melanie.
So I echo what Alma and Claiborne said. I think, a couple of things that I'll add. I think when I'm looking for a school board candidate is also making sure that there's someone who understands the enormity of the roles and responsibilities. Our school board is in charge of a $10 billion enterprise. I mean, that's what Chicago Public Schools is. It's a very complex system and institution. And certainly I want to see candidates who have a demonstrated track record in dealing with complex, issues and organizations. I think that's going to be very important as we deal with, the fiscal, legal, and strategic responsibilities of a school board. I also want to make sure that individuals on day one are properly positioned to do the work. I referenced, the organization Academy for Local Leadership that, not only helps identify potential candidates and prepare them, but also, provide support and training for individuals before they even are seated as school board members. And I would want to see candidates that would make that commitment to go through a training and, like Academy for Local Leadership or an equivalent, so that they're well positioned to hit the ground running on day one.
And if I could add my piece, a person who's ethical, person who's trainable, who's willing to kind of grow as, the role will transition as the board transitions every year, things change. They're willing to adapt, and they're just transparent. They're willing to communicate. They're willing to, hear the different voices and reach a decision that's in the best interest of the students.
Okay, so to be clear, only one of you said, no, I'm not running.
I've checked that off my bucket list, Brandis. I've done it. I want to be sure that we're, informing the broader public and making sure that people are informed about the proper candidates. But I've been there, done that.
Yes. Melanie, Alma.
I'll never say never. Maybe.
Okay. Alma's a hard no. Okay. Just want to be sure, just given, for each of you, like your involvement, your passion about this issue, and obviously your knowledge. So of course the board it's got its set of challenges, gelling together as a group, or not, as we've discussed. There will be another budget shortfall. Whichever superintendent gets hired, hopefully this year, because the current board has been looking for some time now, and we still don't have a permanent superintendent. So whoever does get hired this year will have a brand new board to deal with by this time next year. What priorities would you like to see this new board set? Melanie, I left off with you. I'm going to come back to you, please.
Well, are we saying priorities for the new superintendent?
For the new board, because
For
they've got
the
a set of challenges. So what
Yeah.
should this board prioritize?
Well, I think getting the new superintendent in the position is priority number one, so that there is someone that's kind of ahead of the school. But I do think also making sure that they are getting parent voices in this process. I think a lot of times superintendents are just nominated and put in positions with no real understanding if they have any knowledge of the position itself and what that involves. And so it's been hit or miss with the way things have been done in the past, with who's been appointed and how well or not so well they do with the position, because the board will be having more say-so over that, really understanding like what the role involves and maybe building a description of the role that really harnesses what the role involves from every stakeholder's perspective.
Alma?
Sí, pues precisamente lo que acaba de decir Melanie, ese es el reto más grande, encontrar al superintendente y que sea la persona adecuada para el puesto. Pero yo creo que también otra de las preocupaciones es que no tenemos la Junta de Educación de No Ciudadanos, la Junta Asesora de No Ciudadanos. Esa es otra preocupación y ya estamos faltan unos pocos meses para las elecciones y no tenemos un candidato para superintendente. Tampoco tenemos formada la Junta Asesora de No Ciudadanos. Son dos cosas a la vez en que la Junta tiene que trabajar y yo creo que sí es responsabilidad de ellos, pero también yo creo que con ayuda de los padres de familia podemos hacer el trabajo. Em, es el mayor reto que tienen, encontrar al superintendente y ojalá que sea mismo la persona que sea mismo de aquí de Chicago o al menos que conozca la ciudad de Chicago y las necesidades que se encuentran ahora mismo aquí en la ciudad.
So she was echoing what Melanie said about the challenge that they have is to find the appropriate person as for the superintendent or the CEO, but also establish the non-citizen board, to have the non-citizen board in place. As, as of now, we don't even have a candidate, and we don't have a non-citizen board, so it's two big challenges. I know it's their responsibility, but if they work in collaboration with parents, I think we can do it together. What I would like to see for the superintendent as well is that someone that is Chicagoan. And if it's not a Chicagoan, at least it's a person who knows Chicago, who knows the needs of Chicago, so they can do a better job in this position.
Claiborne, please.
Yeah, so I believe that the priorities should be set out. The board members should work with our lawmakers in Springfield with increasing evidence-based funding for our schools across the state, as well as making sure that the outline of governance that Kids First and other parents prioritize that they should work on should definitely be a part of their priorities. And I cannot stress this enough. And I can't stress this enough. Making sure that our scholars and our students are the center of attention with whatever decisions that are being made.
And Arnie, please.
So I'll add on to what Claiborne said, and just really making sure that this new school board is helping to stabilize the short and long-term fiscal situation of the school district. I mean, we all know that if we don't have predictability about our school budgets for next year, let alone 3 or 4 years, it makes it very difficult for district level leaders, school leaders, teachers, families to properly plan and develop the strategies that they need to do across all levels of the system to move the system forward for our children. So certainly want to be sure that the new board comes in kind of building off the momentum of the existing board and really making sure that the long-term health of the school district is prioritized.
All right. I think that is a good place to leave it. I want to thank all 4 of you for allowing me to join you in conversation about this. I'm going to bring in Imani, our host, to close us out. There she is.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists, Arnie, Alma, Melanie, Claiborne. Thank you to our amazing moderator, Brandis Friedman. We really appreciate you all lending your voice this evening. And I think it's great for us to move on. So now we're going to take a quick look at what's to come for Chicago's transition to an elected school board. So in case any of you parents in the audience today are thinking about running for the school board, maybe Melanie, here is some information about getting on the ballot. In order to appear on the ballot in Illinois, candidates for all offices must collect petition signatures from voters in the district in which they run. Candidates can begin collecting petitions on February 24th. And candidates for school board members need to submit a minimum of 500 valid petition signatures from within their district and are not allowed to file more than 1,500 signatures total. Candidates for school board president have to submit at least 2,500 valid petition signatures from across the city. There is no maximum number for this office. Candidates have to file their petitions with the Chicago Board of Elections between May 18th and May 26th in order to qualify for the ballot. It is highly recommended that candidates seek legal help to navigate the requirements for filing to run for office. And here's what's to come for the school board elections. All school board seats will be up for election on November 3rd, 2026. This includes all 20 districts, 10 of which will elect members for 4-year terms, while the other 10 elect members for 2-year terms. And the board president will be elected for the first time. But happening sooner, there are some other elections on the horizon. LSC elections are coming up on March 18th. This year, high school and elementary school LSC elections will take place on the same day. Parents are allowed to vote at their student school, and all Chicagoans who are at least 17 years old can vote at the schools whose attendance boundaries you live in. Voting takes place at the schools themselves. You'll just have to bring an ID to prove your residency or that your child attends the school. Reminder that you do not have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in LSC elections. This is our call to action. Be sure you go out and vote for LSCs on March 18th. So with that being said, that is our presentation for the evening. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you to our amazing panelists and moderator for their thoughts and insights during this panel. We hope you learned some things and enjoyed the panel as much as we did. As we said, be sure to vote in your LSC elections on March 18th. And please be on the lookout for a follow-up email that will include the poll results from tonight. Thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your night.